today's video, we're going to be digging a little deeper into the relationship between the pump motor and the pump solenoid on a motorized hydraulic leveling system. Now, you can think of the solenoid as the starter for your leveling system. If you've ever worked on cars, then you'll know the appearance of it looks familiar. A solenoid is essentially a plunger-style switch. It has a large lug that brings power in directly from a breaker, a ground wire, and a trigger wire. As long as the solenoid is grounded and receives signal on the trigger wire, it connects an internal bar to the outgoing terminal, sending power to the pump motor and telling it to run. When troubleshooting a solenoid and a motor, the first question I always like to ask, does each component have what it needs and is it doing its job? Now, what I mean by does it have what it needs is power and ground, and specifically healthy voltage, which we'll talk about a little later. The solenoid's job is to send power to the motor, and the motor will then engage the pump, which then pushes fluid through the system. One important aspect of this system in total is usually the presence of a manual reset breaker or a fuse that will provide circuit protection in the instance that we have low voltage, and when it trips, we might not have voltage to the system. So one thing you'll want to keep in mind is if the house batteries get low, the voltage drops, this breaker will trip, and when that happens, the solenoid loses its power source entirely. Most troubleshooting scenarios, whether the system is unresponsive or behaving oddly, come back to one key question: did the pump motor run? And if the answer is no, then we just need to understand why. The fastest way to diagnose this is by checking for power and ground at both the large and small lugs using a multimeter. Healthy voltage on this system is going to be above 12 volts while we are under load. Now, with motorized leveling, one of the important things to take into consideration is that we need the key to be in the accessory position. We don't want any generator, we don't want any solar panels, we don't want anything that's going to inflate that voltage reading. And we can take our first reading right here from the solenoid on the big lug and the small ground lug. If you don't have power there, locate that breaker if you can and see if it's tripped. And if you're unsure where that is, reach out to the OEM. They can point you in its location or let you know if your system will use a different type of circuit protection. If you don't have voltage at the solenoid after resetting the breaker, or if the breaker wasn't tripped at all, you likely have a loose connection somewhere, and that means you're missing either power or ground. Once that's resolved though, just return back to the core question: does the component have what it needs and is it doing its job? If the solenoid has power, ground, and a trigger signal but doesn't engage, that points to a failed solenoid and it's likely stuck internally, or maybe something else is going on and we would need to replace it. If power makes it all the way to the pump motor but the motor doesn't run, then the motor has what it needs but it's not doing the job, and in that case the motor has failed and we would need to replace it. As a final thought, if the pump motor runs during the diagnostics, the solenoid and motor are almost never the cause of your issue. You can continue troubleshooting elsewhere in the system. Thank you for joining me as we took a deeper look between the relationship between the pump motor and the pump solenoid. Not all hydraulic leveling systems are the same, but understanding how these two components work together will make troubleshooting much easier.